Hail, hail, Yngwie Frey, bringer of the sun and rain, Lord of elves and peace and fields, we'll plant our seeds for abundant yields. Hail, hail, Yngwie Frey, bless us with your gifts this day. Hail, hail, Yngwie Frey, bringer of the sun and rain. Hail, hail, Yngwie Frey, bless us with your gifts this day.
Welcome, everybody, to another Pagan Revivalist show. This show is one of the most anticipated shows this year, and that's surprising because we did an awesome show with, Imperium Press analyzing axiality just last month. So if you're interested in liking these show, if you like this show, you want more shows like it, check our back catalog. We got so many free on MP3 because we love to give you good information and not behind a paywall. That's just how we do things here. And so with us today is the founder of an organization that is making waves in the heathen sphere. This is a man who is an elder. This is a man who is who founded a great organization spread across the United States that is making pagan revivalism inevitable. A rising star in heathenry, the one, the only Michael. Michael, how's it going today?
It's going really good. Real quick, I'd like to also mention all the effort of our leadership and the people who believed in this idea when no one else did. I think that they equally deserve as much praise as anyone else in this in all the success that's coming towards us.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a team effort for sure. But we'll get into all of that. And so, I just for people who are unaware of you specifically, could you introduce yourself to us?
Yeah, my name is Michael Sessoms. I'm the Hildinger of Raven Folk United. I've been around for a long time. People in the political spectrum might know me under the name Myers. I've been around a while, and in the religious aspect, ever since my 20s.
So that's quite a while. How many years have you been in, if you don't mind me asking?
Since a kid, actually. I'm known for a lot of political activism and things of that nature when I was younger. And as an adult man, once I started having families, I really focused a lot of my attention into the religion.
So as far as how long you've been in heathenry, how long would you say that you've been involved in pagan revival?
I'm 44 right now, so probably my late 20s, and I owe a lot of that credited to the late Goldie Michael Hunter, who was the predominant reason of me finding this faith.
Well, look, there have been a lot of people who've come in over the last couple of years. So having somebody who's been around for several decades, I'm sure that you've seen a lot of movement in the heathen sphere. And so, on a more specific note, how long have you been a Godar? And
I think that's an excellent question. So I'm going to say that I've been leading religiously probably soon after I started taking the faith serious, so in my 30s. But more recently, in the position of like an actual practitioner as a Goldie, I'm going to say just since Raven Folk United started. With other groups that I was involved in previously, I was in programs and I did lead ritual. I think that title is prestigious and it holds a lot of weight. So I'm going to say, since we started Raven Folk United, despite the fact I've been leading in ritual and in that aspect for quite some time.
Very good, very good. And as far as like the changes in heathenry that you've seen over the years, from your perspective as somebody who's been in it for a long time, what has it been like to see the dare I say evolution of heathenry from when you first got active to today?
Without exaggerating, I'd have to say that it's a night and day uh, contrast with each other. The beginning moments of Also True for me were mostly contingent on gatherings by fire, learning some about the lore, but mostly bonding. There is the metagenetic aspect of the blood memory, so obviously this faith feels more natural, and the settings make one uh, feel at home. But lately, and I've been enjoying this, there seems to be a lot more depth and realization that our ancestral traditions aren't this one long time ago thing that we can't really grasp. We have enough knowledge to recreate enough of it, and we are genetically related to those individuals to bring that faith literally into the real modern world. I think that that development is fantastic and what most excites me. In our pagan sphere, there's a little bit of controversy, New Agey or revivalism, and I'm pretty hardline traditionalist, but I will say and want to express that to our people that practice this religion, I believe it to be true that what unites us is far greater than what divides us. And that as we follow this path towards ancestral tradition, it really is going to be a slight merging towards a united future. That's the game plan I have.
No, I definitely agree with that. Despite the theological priors and theological differences, revival has, taken on so many different forms. I often liken revival to like a forest fire, right? And those who've been in the Western Canada, Western United States, or any part in the world where wildfires are natural, they happen. And a forest that has stood for hundreds or even thousands of years gets burnt down. But what you tend to see afterward is a bunch of new trees begin to sprout, and some of them will make it to full maturity, others won't. But that variation is expected. It's expected during this time, and those trees that stay true to and don't mutate wildly out of proportion, those are the ones that are going to reach full maturity. And in time, in the grand universe of time, the wildfire, it will leave no evidence of its existence because the forest will return. And, yeah, a tree may not be in the exact same position, as it was, 1,000 years ago, but in the grand universe of time, that forest will return. And that's the beauty of revival. And so, as far as the work that you've done, let me ask you a question. Can you tell us about Raven Folk United as an organization and how it got started?
Yeah, so there was a split with our predecessor organization, and Raven Folk United was designed with the idea of Hermann and the Battle of Teutoburg in mind, not just on the aspect of pushing back against adversaries or oppressors, but more along the lines of a collective group of kingdoms and the governing aspect of our ancestral traditions versus that of the papacy or some kind of alien influence in general.
Yeah, the how Raven Folk United got started. It's for such a big organization, right? And it's central to the story. And I noticed you said split from a prior organization, and if I'm not mistaken, that organization was the True Folk Assembly. And just could you tell us your side of the story in regards from Raven Folk United's split from the AFA?
Yeah, absolutely. I was kind of expecting this topic to come up. So I was a part of the True Folk Assembly, absolutely. At the time of the split, I was no longer oathed through them as leadership. I was released to that months prior. I had a lot of disagreements with the spiritual practices, but nonetheless, it's really never a reason to throw a spear in the greater successes of our people. Now, that being said, it did lead me in a perfect opportunity when something very atrocious happened to be the one who was able and capable and willing to throw the spear. So it came to my desk, if you will, that there was pedophiles in the Oz and True Folk Assembly. And I want to be clear that if someone was found out to be that way and then removed, it is what it is. You got to do your due diligence as security, but you can never catch everyone, right? But upon receiving court paperwork and doing investigative research, I was appalled, honestly, to come to the conclusion that they knew years prior that this individual was on Megan's Law. That person was admitted into the organization, and instead of denied, they slipped through. Now, there's emails and documents stating all these things, and in that, the leadership there chose to take his story, that it was a Romeo and Juliet case. But even in his own words, he stated that he was 23 and she was 16. The reality of it, though, was a little bit more sinister, to a great extent, actually. He was in his 20s, certainly. She was 14, and there was multiple rape attempts that same night. Also, the person he hung out with a lot and brought to events with him constantly was on Megan's Law, also as his roommate, and he raped an 11-year-old. When this was found out, I hope that you guys can understand I had a bit of outrage. It wasn't so much that we caught these people, it was the fact that they weren't looked into deep enough, and that the word of a person on Megan's Law was taken and not looked into at all. And the jeopardy of our communities and the families thereof who put our trust in leadership were betrayed. It enrages me even to this day when we talk about it. I don't expect anyone to take my word for it. There's plenty of evidence, and I believe that you will be sharing that on your channel after this immediate discussion. But I do want to say something, that there was a moment where I was told that we have no choice because they're the only people doing Oz the True. And I took that personal, because not only did I believe that they were doing it wrong, I thought that they do not care about our people, obviously. And with a heavy heart, I started Raven Folk. It's painted as it was this spur of the moment or a plotted coup. And I take that personal, because I still have a heavy heart in all of the friendships and loved ones that I've had to part ways with over this. In the fallout of it, they went so low as to make a chat where they talked about me and my ex-fiance Ashley Ray's dead child, and there was really fallacies at foot that are unforgivable. I don't think that the organization as a whole is flawed, but I think their leadership is not only absolutely corrupt, but not accountable. I do not believe that this faith is a faith of grace. I believe it's a faith of atonement, and there needs to be accountability for all actions. So one of the fundamental principles of Raven Folk United amongst our laws is no one is beyond reproach, including myself. We made it that way. We have a very stringent set of bylaws and principles that are enforced. And because of this situation, we were certain to include that as a top priority. We would do good as men to realize that we are not gods, and our representation there of them is a service, and we should be really wise of that, in my opinion.
Absolutely. As Odin says, in the Havamal, and I think Odin is the highest authority that you're going to get in all of heathenry. When you see evil, you call it out. That's Havamal 127. You have a duty and obligation to do so. In ancient times, we used to have walls around our towns and villages, not to keep people in, to keep enemies out. And if one, falls asleep on guard duty, letting evil people in the gates, that's a neglect of duty. And there has to be atonement for that. Absolutely. It's an honor thing. It's an integrity thing. And so, standing up on principle is something that is not only warranted, but it's expected of somebody who follows ancestral faith. And so what I did was I forwarded a post from Folkish Awakening that they posted that kind of outlines this. And for those in the audience, or if you're listening to the show after the fact, you could just look up this particular post. Could you walk us through some of the pictures and what essentially is being communicated in this post?
Sure. So there's I'm not directly looking at it, but I'm pretty certain I know what it is. There is a depiction of the emails in security chat where Matt admits that it was his mistake. He let him through, which in itself is whatever, except for the date on it is years prior to us calling them out on it. In their own database, which we also have mentioned, or a picture of, it shows that in the description of the database, they're aware of his sexual charges. And it's actually listed on there, which is mind-blowing to me. And that's also insane that we would have any sexual degeneracy like that in membership. Also, let's see here. There's pictures showing them at events afterwards with leadership, and the list continues, right? I mean, you guys can read through it. I believe that the individual's paperwork is actually there, that you guys don't have to take my word for, right? You guys can go ahead and file for these documents yourself, and I encourage you to do so, really.
Yeah, one of the things, and I talk about this, is one of the most valued things in our ancestral faith is our ancestors. And in our ancestral faith, our ancestors come back through our bloodline. So in other words, your kids are your ancestors reborn. And so if you put your own children or the children of related kinsfolk at risk, then you are putting your ancestors at risk. In other words, you are going against the ancestors in a lot of ways and going against the wills of the gods. As Tacitus points out in Germania, it says, it was highly infamous to limit the number of children or to harm any of their subsequent offspring. And so, in other words, even from a Roman, they knew that we took care of our young, that we looked out for the most vulnerable in our community. That's what we're supposed to do. And so, yeah, no, but of course, I did want to thank you for giving your side of the story in that, because I know that there's a lot of accusations thrown around at Raven Folk United. But I think when everybody hears the other side of the story, it becomes clear why what happened. But anyway, of course, this isn't about them. Let's sorry for the deviation there. But but I did want to ask specifically, what distinguishes Raven Folk United from other heathen groups? What makes Raven Folk United unique in that respect?
So I feel like there's a lot of things that distinguish us in the way that we approach our religion, the seriousness in which we try to care for our communities. But two aspects, most particular, I think, is that even though we are legally a religious community, and I stand behind that, we consider ourselves a tribal folk nation in the aspect that nation and the natal umbilical ties of the land in which we come from consists of pan-European ethnicity. Well, those nations there, the governments at least, have slightly, if not extremely, betrayed our people. And so we see ourselves as Raven folk, a collection of pan-European ethnic tribal people. And we really do consider ourselves a nation of itself. In the world which is modern and full of poison, we think that ancestral tradition and ritual is the cure. Also, I think that we are unique in the aspect, not unlike most other religious communities, we have a top-down structure, but our jarls at that stage in the leadership structure are encouraged to build kindreds up and to create kingdoms in their own right. We have no desire to rule over everyone to the point where it's complete control. We want to have a lot of freedom, and in that, we've created a leadership structure that encourages and supports that process.
Excellent, and and that's part of the beauty, right? Part of the beauty is a little bit of autonomy, right? And but I'm sure we'll talk more about that in a second. But just in general, if you could give a rundown of Raven Folk United's core tenets, I'm sure that there's people who'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, and as I'm going through this or any discussion as far as Raven Folk United is concerned, I invite anyone to check out our website, ravenfolkunited.org, simply because we have everything in extreme detail there. We've taken a great time to articulate ourselves as far as ethnicity and core values. With that being said, I would say our core tenets are predominantly the Assyrian Code of Nine and our Raven laws. and a perspective point that I think is unique, in which we try to defend our community physically, spiritually, and socially, not only in the Innengard, but Udengard as well. Anyone who's not familiar with 9 noble virtues: flourish, knowledge, change, fairness, balance, conflict, and control. And our laws, extreme amount of writing in each one, but to go over basically, we talk about ethics, God of order, the goodness and who you should not hail, obviously. We have self-determination, frith, unity, unblemished integrity, and intolerable conduct, which we list a lot of them. And then we talk about enforcement, which is pretty important, because without enforcement and accountability, laws don't really mean anything.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's part of the one of the issues that, a lot of people talk about is, accountability and stuff like that. So as far as accountability goes, I think people would be interested in knowing, you know, what would be things that would require atonement, and within Raven Folk United, what are some ways to achieve that, right, as far as accountability is concerned? Because we hear so often in the sphere that accountability is hard to come by, and I know that you guys are setting the bar high, showing how that can be done. So if you could tell us a little bit about that, I think that a lot of people would be interested.
Yeah, I want to be pretty clear too that we're firm, but I don't try to lead without empathy. And I think that our Gothar do an exemplary job at trying to encourage conflict resolution and things of those nature. That being said, depending on what laws they broke or the intent behind it, the consequences will vary drastically. Anything from being pulled from a certain position or kicked out of membership entirely. Ultimately, though, we have a structure of resolution set up that it seems pretty solid in my regards. And I will say that we've had enough examples to try and navigate within our short time that we're perfecting it daily. Immediately, though, when there's accusations of any kind of severity, everyone involved is pulled from all the chats and conflict mediation takes place. We have a top-tier security team. I think it's very important to mention that they're top tier. In fact, we've denied 30% of our applicants to date, and we're pretty proud of that we have a pretty high standard. When there's 2 individuals that have an issue, it does matter gender-wise, because as far as the men go, the same rules apply. We have the same conflict resolution that we have for any membership, but then we do have an extra layer, which Home Gang is, on very rare occasions, if called for and accepted, followed through with, which is mutual combat in a very professional and productive way to resolve the disagreement. And we do this in a contained aspect so that violence doesn't become this obscure thing that people aren't familiar with. But let me reiterate, it's not the go-to. We want to use intellect and civility and nobility in trying to resolve all conflicts, though we do lean on our ancestral law in all aspects.
100%. And for those who may not be aware, shame on you. You described it perfectly. Home Gang is conflict resolution physically. This is not a fight to the death, but it is, fisticuffs. Back in the old days, talking like Boomer, Gen X era, that's how issues were solved between men, right? Even in a predominantly Christian society. If they had a argument and things, and it wouldn't be resolved, instead of having bad blood and brooding about it and plotting revenge, behind the scenes and lawfare, they would just throw a couple of jabs outside of the bar, and then, buy each other a drink afterward. Problem resolved. And as far as, just dueling is concerned, we've had U.S. presidents who have dueled, okay, while in office. So this isn't like thuggish behavior. And viewing it that way is part of the modern disease, because this is just how men operate. I'm sure you would agree with that.
Yeah, I agree with you completely, but it's worth mentioning that as some might sit back from a outside wall perspective and think it barbaric, as soon as these laws were implemented and we trust in ancestral law, the men's chat got a lot more polite. I find it funny and wonderful at the time, right? When there's a accountability and the option, could be there to get punched in the face, all of a sudden everyone's very articulate and manners appear. So I think that's why they were laws in the first place.
No, definitely agree. And you'll notice that there's an attitude shift when there are consequences, stuff like that. So I'm definitely right there with you. So as far as the core tenets, these are perfect. Now, I posted something that is from your guys' website, if I'm not mistaken, about the structure of Raven Folk United, and posted a little graphic on the channel. And so would you go over for us what the structure of Raven Folk United is? Walk us through that diagram, if you could, please.
Yeah, we try to structure it after ancestral tradition, and I'm probably going to use or overuse that verbiage a lot during our conversation, but it's the truth. We have the Hildinger at the top. We have our Havala, Miss Heather Klinkenbeard, who is oversees our Gothar, and our Gothar are really, honestly, the lead of our community in the aspect that I have the right to overrule things or to advertently make a decision, but a lot of times if people just trust their folk or their leadership, things are fine. And I have very proudly to this very day never had to use that authority, which I think is a sign that we're on the right track. Next, we have our Jarls, which are in control of regions, and then Carls, which would basically be our representative state reps. We have members there at the bottom part, but it doesn't mean they're lesser than, it's just the structure of. And then parallel, we have oath leadership, which would be like Treasury Department, Family Services, which does a wonderful job. And on the other side of that is the Manor Bund, which I have to touch on because it is important. We have this revival of ancestral tradition, and amongst one of the calls, as men talk and women talk, and we bring up relationship aspects, we as men folk of our community came to the conclusion that if we as men acted like men, we don't need to dictate to our women what to become. They would follow suit, and we would enjoy each other in our natural roles. So with that, we have a Manor Bund, which is warrior class of our men, but then the auxiliary, which is a requirement basically for any men who wishes to have a say within our community. This isn't a community where the guys sit around with the women gossiping, smoking cigarettes, and drinking beer while some men go off and spar. We're very proud to say that every man fights in Raven Folk United. And it isn't that we are trying to be overly strict or have over high standards. It's the fact that we're trying to keep the standards that our ancestors once had and elevate the modern sickness that has become modern times amongst our people.
Yeah, back in the ancient times, right? If you were a man, okay, who wasn't like elderly or like feeble or anything like that, you were expected, if your community called on you for defense, to grab a shield, grab a spear, and get in a line, right? And so this is just duty, honor, responsibility, integrity. That's very ancestral, right? But here's the thing, especially with what's going on out there today, you have to be prepared or just able to defend not only yourself but your family too. And what a great way for bonding, because that's how guys bond, right? Learn some skills, make some good brothers, but also at the same time learn useful skills that are beneficial to you. It's going to give you a lot more confidence. It's going to give you the ability, if called upon, to defend yourself or your family. I think all around, I'm surprised more organizations don't take a role like that, and it impresses me, quite frankly. And as far as the reception of the Manor Bund itself, how has that been, especially with the ladies in your organization? If you don't mind me asking.
Yeah, I think that they approve of it. There may have been, concerns here or there. I'm not quite 100% sure. But I will say at the events, when the fellas are out there with our shirts off, handling business, I don't hear anything but cheers from the sidelines. I think that the women enjoy our men being men. And I love our women, and I enjoy them being them. They're also a pillar of our community, and they deserve men that will stand up and protect them. I believe that with my whole heart.
Absolutely. And, that's one of the core things that I think is finally being resolved, is, allowing men to be maximally masculine and allowing our women folk to be maximally feminine. And we're going to cheer each other on. because we can't be folkish whilst looking down on half of our folk, right? But that issue is being resolved, and I know you guys are leading the charge in that, and that's amazing. That's really, really good. And so, just as a got a question here for you, which is in relation to the structure, right? Walk us through. Use me as an example, right? I'm a prospect, right? So, how would I, go through the process of becoming a part of Raven Folk United and going through these ranks? Like, if you could use me as an illustration to guide me through this structure.
Yeah. So first and foremost, the most important thing I would say is, again, check out the website. Not to reiterate it, for promotional purposes, but it's really is the truth. We have everything listed there to great extent, and it's pretty thorough. And I would encourage anyone who even considers joining us to understand that those laws are our laws, and we see ourselves as a folk nation. They're absolutely enforced laws. So that would be number one, agreeing to the same view of our faith and future that we see, so that you could become part of it. If someone doesn't, then they shouldn't even sign up. Other than that, once they come in, if they're a man, they go into the chat groups we have, and also the men's group. And if they're a woman, they go into all the members as well, and then into the women's chat. Honestly, there is a separation amongst our men and women's chat, so I'm not familiar too much with what goes on in there. A lot of that's trusted in our halala as our men do our thing. I can say for a man, immediately you're encouraged to join auxiliary. At any age, there's a list of requirements. It can be sent to that individual probably upon membership, I think. And we encourage them because that's the bare minimum requirement for men of our community. Absolutely no one in leadership that's a man can be leadership without being part of at least the auxiliary. Then we have, weekly calls and participation kind of is dependent on that individual's drive. So if they're motivated and we get to know them and feel comfortable with them and they show up in the real world, which is another thing, we're not an online organization. We do real world ritual. And though we do have a lot of online resources, we advocate for in real life over everything. If a member of leadership has to miss a call because there's something in real life going on, we encourage that. That being said, the first step is seeing what they do locally. And we're very slow to that process. And something I want to mention that's probably pretty important. Our membership information is only accessible to the same 4 people who have had access to it from the beginning. We do not willy-nilly let our leadership get access to all of our membership information, and we guard it very carefully. So rest assured, if you do sign up, that information is safeguarded quite carefully.
Yeah, no, as far as, I can only speak for myself, of course, but I've been to groups, I've been to organizations, I've been to, just meetups, where I'm a guest and I got to get background checked. And that's just part of the process, and rest assured that, this is standard operating procedure for, groups and organizations that take the safety of their families seriously. Right. Like, for example, you wouldn't let just some random person outside of your house inside of your house. You want to know if they're good people or not. Right. So a similar thing in relation to folks who are joining up. But as far as like, somebody who's interested, are there like outreach events that are for like non-members so that they can get to meet you guys and stuff like that, like a moot or something like that?
Absolutely, but I'm going to reiterate that they do have to get background checks. I mean, that's just a Raven folk thing since the beginning. So whether they join us or do not join us, it's inconsequential, really. We need to make sure that they're safe to be around our families. And that's one of those lines we draw in the sand that we won't differ on even a little bit.
Very good. No, and that's just, like I said, for those who are listening in the audience or listening after the fact, if you're part of an organization or if you're interested in joining, this is just standard practice for anybody who's been involved for more than several years. So don't let that scare you into not coming to ritual, because those things act as safeguards to protect the community and to make sure that you're around good people. So That being said, though, I think a reasonable question to ask is how big is Raven Folk United?
So without trying to over exaggerate, I think we're in between the 300 and 400 range, roughly. I don't have the exact numbers, but I think that's pretty good considering we have a 30% denial rate and we have only been around 3 years or upcoming on 3 years. So we're quite large in the aspect of being so young, and we do.
You guys are taking off. 300 or 400 is pretty big.
Yeah, and I don't want to quote exactly because I don't know the exact numbers. They change quite often, but I believe for sure we're in that range. So I want to speak honest and not over exaggerate.
Hey, that's amazing. That's really amazing. You guys are definitely a rising star. That's for sure. And so, for so many people, how many Gothar are part of Raven Folk United? If you don't mind me sharing that.
Sure. So I think we have about five. You would think we'd have more. We had to remove some. Not something I'm really proud of, but it is a reality. And we don't have any new Goldar yet. We're very strict on trying to promote people into the positions we promote them into that will be beneficial to the community as a whole. So it's a process. I wish that it was easier to get Goldar to move, faster, but I don't think there's a way to manifest things artificially just because you have a want. As a lot of other organizations may prompt people into positions because there's a need for them, I would rather, and this is unfortunate for the men and women we have in the positions now, there's a heavier load on us, but I think it's better to have a heavier load than to have someone guided by a person not worthy of that position. I believe that to be true, and it seems to have benefited us to stay strong on those beliefs.
Quality over quantity, 100%. Now, I think a follow-up question would be in order here. Are there plans to institute kind of like a Gothar training program for those who are involved in Raven Folk? They're aware of the core tenets and stuff like that. They've already been approved. Are there like classes or things that need to be done for somebody who's in Raven Folk to accept the call to become a Gothar?
Yeah, 100%. We have a program our Goldar work together on, and our Havala Heather, she's wonderful. The thing is, we're kind of reworking it right now, so there's a stall on it because we're trying to perfect it a little bit more. But there's absolutely an avenue for people to move up. It's a slow process, but you can't become something like that overnight. We haven't incorporated some age requirements, though. I think it's 35, if I'm correctly speaking. And again, if I speak on something, I'm from the best of my memory. But I believe that it's 35 now that we've said to be a Goldar, because we do think age is a requirement for maturity and outlook in general. There's a lot of young men out there, and women for that matter, who are definitely mature for their age or have a lot of life experience, but years on this planet do play a role. And so we've incorporated that.
100%. And that's one of the things, just because as a Gothar, I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here, but it requires a life experience to be able to help people in need. Marriage counseling is another thing. You got to have experience in that, right? It always bothered me before I came home to ancestral faith, when I was a Christian, getting relationship advice from a person who's never been in a relationship. That just seems a little weird to me. And so I'm sure that those things are taken into consideration, and that's good, because you want somebody who's been through life to help others go through life, right? I think that should be common sense, but common sense ain't so common, especially in this particular age. But I'm glad to hear that you guys are setting requirements, but not outrageous requirements like
I want to clarify, though, we do take it as serious as we do for a pretty good reason. I don't want to use myself as too many examples, but there was a time amongst an organization where I had a loss, and we were preparing for the funeral, and I called the clergy, and they answered the phone, and they were very sincere. I'll give them that. But I asked them, what was the process? How should I bury this child? And they told me basically to do whatever I thought was right. And I did. I did the funeral on the land of the family, and we buried the child by the tree. And I think we did a very good job at honoring uh, you know, that individual. I just think that, without getting too much into it, I just think that when you come to your clergy or people in position of religious leadership, they need to have more than an answer that do whatever you want. There needs to be a process or support there to help them cultivate a ritual in the ancestral traditions of our people. And now that we're on our own path here and we're creating this, those are things that I reflect on often, because it's where we have to be better. We don't get the luxury of falling short for our people. We have to try harder. We have to push that bar and standard to a new place.
Absolutely, absolutely, and again, my condolences, of course. And but it's very true what you say, that when people are coming to a spiritual leader, that they need guidance, and not just um, the equivalent of I don't know, because that's not acceptable. And so you guys are doing it right, and making sure that your goals are top notch. That's part of it, because otherwise, um, at that point, you are your own spiritual leader if you're told to do whatever you want, right? And if that's the case, then why look up to somebody who's just going to defer back to you? So 100% totally agree, and I'm sure that as far as the leadership in Raven Folk United is concerned, that those concerns are addressed and they need to be addressed, and it's good to see that you guys are leading the charge in that. And so, switching topics a little bit, we're going to talk a little bit about celebrations, and something that has come up recently, which is this debate happens every couple of months, every single year, which is the dates of celebration for some of the bloats. And so, I wanted to ask you directly, which system of dates does Ravenfolk United follow? Do they follow a more seasonal path in alignment with like the solstices and equinoxes, or do they take the mystery calendar approach?
I think it'd be fair to say that, it's a little bit of both. We have been blending a lot more traditional heathenry into our calendars and celebrations, but it is a little bit in between. I think that me, like I said, personally being very traditionalist, doesn't negate the fact that a considerable amount of our membership have more esoteric practices. And again, I believe that what unites us is more important than what divides us. That being said, I'm always going to try to push the traditional narrative, probably to an uncomfortable level, and I'm sure that I'll get enough pushback. But the reality of this is, it's kind of a cohesion and a work together process. So our calendar's semi-split for sure, but I think for now, at least, that's going to be a natural progression, and it will become and evolve what it's meant to. That's an honest answer.
Certainly, the hands of those things, as far as which path heathenry takes. And look, Odin says, there are several bloats that you need to do, but in there he doesn't specify a date. You notice that, and so as long as those bloats are celebrated, in my estimation, and I've written about this on the channel, that as long as those bloats are done, who am I to say this is wrong, this is right, and stuff like that. It's if it's not spoken about by Odin, Thor, Freyr, Njord, then who am I to dictate that on that level of importance? And I'm sure you would agree with that assessment as well.
Yeah,
but no,
you're talking about Sumar, Betar, and Yul, right? Those are the
absolutely.
three that dictates that we do. And there's different reasonings behind them too, which probably is an entirely different podcast. But again, atonement comes into play. So it's very important in our culture.
One of the things that I really appreciate is the sacrifice element, because a lot of people are very hesitant about those things, and it's probably because a lot of folks have just been separated from the rural environment, the rural upbringing. But I know that you guys don't shy away from that, and that's something that really impresses me personally. And so as far as the atonement and the nature of sacrifice and stuff like that, just a out of the blue question for you here. What are the parameters of sacrifice as far as Raven Folk United ritual is concerned?
So I think everyone's familiar with the aspect of mead or wine. We have been incorporating milk, butter, honey into some more recent bloats, which is actually very traditional. We do a live animal ritual as well. I want to specify, though, that these aren't done often, and when they're done, they're for major holidays, and that the meat is eaten, and that the sacrifice itself is spoiled prior to the ritual. Animals are cruelly butchered constantly throughout this country for McDonald's or any other conglomerate food source, and we take great pride in the fact that we treat the animal well and do a service to dispatch it as quickly and humanely as possible. That being said, I personally feel that modern dramatic people in this society, at least, have a disconnect with not only life and death, but where our food comes from. And I think that you cannot recreate the transition between life and death artificially in a book. That it was in our lore and ceremonies for a reason, and that is because that transition between realms is an opportunity to both give glory and sacrifice to the gods, but also messages and reciprocity on a level that can't be manifested artificially. Of course, that's my opinion, but I think that our lore resonates a similar perspective.
100%. And one of the things that I like to point out to people is Kennelinga Saga, right, which is a saga in Iceland when heathenry was still a thing. And, it points out that the Gothar would look specifically for those who did not prostrate before the gods and did not sacrifice to the gods, which are things that are prohibited by Christians to do so. And so they were on the lookout for this, and they actually outlawed people, calling it false religion, right? Or, if you want to use a modern terminology, it would be fake pagan, right? And so, one of the things that kind of, it's something that I point out sometimes, which is if you would have been exiled from heathenry by the ancestors who, by the way, got their religion from the gods, so they're exercising the wills of the gods, then, it should be redone. That being said, though, I understand full well that there were a lot of folks who gave silver for sacrifice. There were a lot of people who gave their crops as sacrifice, and things that they built, with their own hands, things that they've made. And so, but as far as keeping it traditional, that's where revival really sets a high bar, because there's a lot of folks who shy away from that. And I think that the whole point of getting involved in pagan revival is to get back to our roots. And so, why are we going to take half measures getting back to our roots? And that's why, like, I really appreciate what you guys are doing and standing up for it and defending it, because that's part of who we are. And as far as the law is concerned, it is constitutionally protected. There's a Supreme Court case about that, and I'll post that on the channel after this. But yeah, it's part of who we are, and we shouldn't shy away from it just because modern sensibilities and people have, gotten away from their roots, right? The whole point of ancestral faith is to get back to your roots. That being said, as far as ritual goes, walk me through it, right? Let's say I'm a guest. I'm attending ritual. What would it be like so that I could get a picture of what a Raven Folk United bloat would look like?
Okay, so I will say that sometimes they vary from this depiction, but most commonly, this is what you will expect. First and foremost, at our big events, we take time beforehand to explain the ritual to everyone, even if they've heard it 1,000 times, so that they know their part. And if there's language used like Old Norse, they also understand what the verbiage is, so that they're not just hearing this language, they understand what the intent is behind it. Then there's usually like a 30-minute period where individuals go and we encourage our people to clean up and a lot of us change into white linen. I want to specify here that we do not dress up LARPing. We don't do it on an everyday society aspect. No one's wearing furs around the event. Everyone's dressed pretty modern age. But we do simplify it and wear white and try to do that as far as unifying our folk in the ritual. So then we come back and we meet again and we gather in procession style to the ritual. There's sacred rites done, and we offer gifts for a gift. Try to encourage reciprocity and good standing with our gods. And then we end the ceremony, and there's a encouragement to sit in that energy for a minute, and you'll see people meditate. Some people will go off and think, and some people immediately go change back and go into the hall. But nonetheless, the piety aspect is a cut above, at least in my opinion. And we've had a lot of visitors who've accredited us for that. We take ritual very serious. It's not one of those things that's done half-heartedly at all.
Yeah, no, taking the ritual seriously, 100%. And as far as like, you know, the energy of group ritual, you can't beat it. You know, and this is why, like, I've encouraged so many people, you know, find a kindred, you know, find a group, you know, have that group ritual, because I'm telling you right now, okay, and I'm sure you know, like I said, I'm preaching to the choir here, but we were meant to worship together, right? Now, yeah, we could worship at home too. That's part of the beauty of, you know, pagan revival. We don't have to go to, you know, a temple in order for the rituals that we give to our gods and to our ancestors to be validated. But at the same time, you know, we used to get together for bloat. It was a communal feast. It was a communal ritual. We would dance. We would sing. We'd get to know each other. You know, we'd get to share our stories around the fire. And you can't do that by yourself. And it's way more powerful. And you could definitely feel the gods moving through group ritual in a way that practiced by yourself just doesn't reach that, right? When you're using a frequency, you'll have that frequency bounce back to you. But if there's a harmony between different frequencies reaching the same thing, it's going to be amplified. It's going to have that feedback that is going to amplify the signal in a way that makes it a lot more powerful, a lot more beautiful. And so couldn't agree more that, you know, group ritual is 100% a must. And I'm glad that, you know, there's organizations that are specializing in making sure that these things are done professionally, that they're done traditionally, and with reverence and honor, right? And I know that you guys do that. You've sent me videos of some of your rituals, and it was beautiful. I mean, what can I say? You know, the setting, you know, the rituals, the community. You just can't get that from home. You got to go out in person. That being said, though, go ahead.
Quick, I want to since we're talking on ritual, I don't know where the next question may be varied from. I want to touch on a topic that you were stating, group ritual. We've had a few. I don't know if you call them supernatural or synchronicities, if you will. I believe it's.
We should.
Right, and I think that the gods directly have communicated in, especially our first all thing we did. Of all places, my bucket list has always been the Northern Lights. I think a lot of us who haven't been to Europe probably want to see that in their lifetime. It's very ancestral. So I'm probably not unique in that. We were holding bloat for our culmination of our all thing, where it was us introducing ourselves and calling in the ancestors. And in the middle of rural Oklahoma, the Northern Lights appeared. So all of those pictures you see of Raven folk with the Northern Lights, that's not CGI or edited. That is actually the Northern Lights that appeared at our culmination birth event, where we honored Frigga and pulled the Odin's War banner up and held it high. The Northern Lights literally appeared as we walked into the circle. We couldn't have timed it. We couldn't have known. And it was beyond the description of words. I just wanted to share that with everyone.
Yeah, you sent me that picture, and, you know, it was just rural Oklahoma. We're not talking about, you know, Alaska. We're not talking about, you know, Wisconsin. You know, we're talking Oklahoma, that's pretty dang south. And seeing the Northern Lights that south during ritual when you entered the circle, I mean, what was it like for everybody there seeing something not just that rare, but in a place that it shouldn't exist? What was that like for you?
I feel that we have a lot of warriors in our ranks, and I'm not going to speak for everyone, but I think I'm correct in stating that it was emotional beyond my ability to articulate. There was a an overjoyous emotion, and our eyes looked or resembled that of children on a holiday morning, full of wonder and hope. And there was a confirmation almost that we were doing the right thing and that we were possibly in favor in doing this. There was nothing but celebratory. There was constant gasping and almost disbelief. It was the topic of not only that evening, but prior events where similar things took place. And we don't really have explanations for why it happens. We just lean on our belief system, and I truly personally believe it's the gods.
Absolutely. I mean, like, as far as something that rare and in a place where it shouldn't be, I mean, how can you explain that other than the gods were with you and they were right there watching over you and giving you a sign? I mean, that's part of the beauty of pagan revival, that you see these things a lot, in such a way that it's not only confirmation, but it's also approval, that the gods have been waiting for us with open arms, waiting for us to just turn towards them. And they're more than happy to embrace us. It's amazing to see.
Pretty profound. When that happened, you would think that that would inflate the hubris of a community, right? Instead, it was a lot more humility. And I think that I have to commend our leadership, especially because they've taken it as not that they're particularly favored or chosen, but that there's an extreme duty on our shoulders. And you can see it in every aspect and every sacrifice that they make. We work full-time jobs, and our leadership tirelessly takes time away from their families and tries to advocate for the community. They're on constant calls and video chats and promoting our ancestral traditions, to the point a lot of times where they themselves suffer. And I can never enough thank them, and the folk are forever in their debts. I again want to praise the leadership of Raven Folk United.
No, it's definitely amazing. And time, putting in the effort, is a sacrifice unto itself. And I'm sure that the gods definitely appreciate all the hard work that you've put in, and the good folks over there, who make Raven Folk United possible. And so, just a follow up to that, is there another event that has taken place at a Raven Folk ritual that you'd like to share with us?
Honestly, there's a ton of them. There's been objects and photographs. There's been solar events. There's been singularities, a plethora. But I think that the Northern Lights example kind of compounds it all into the most extreme example.
That one's a big one. Yeah, that's amazing. It really is. And so I wanted to ask, just kind of circling back. So I know that on your website, ravenfolkunited.org, everybody check that out when you get an opportunity, that you have a lot of online shows. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to post the Raven Folk United call schedule. And so could you tell us a little bit about these shows that you do? And could you tell people how they themselves can learn more about the shows that you do on your website?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have a all-inclusive show we're working on called Voyage Home, but though we're very far as the graphic designs, we really want to promote a message that is not just entertaining, but beneficial to our religious community. So we've been working on that, and hopefully sometime this year that will be out for just everyone really in our religious community, whether they're us or not. What you've posted though is all of our chats that are for Raven Folk members. And it's less about exclusion and more about propping up those people who are us, and cultivating a culture within the Inengard. So we have a really extensive lore study. We talk about the lore and Skaldic poetry to great extents. We have wonderful men and women's chats. There's meditations and studies on, like, the One-Eyed God the men did for a while. It was a very good book. There's so many excerpts in there from actual lore references that it might as well be a college thesis. We have a philosophy form, and once every 2 weeks, and then on the other week, bi-weekly, it's more of an esoteric aspect. So it gives an opportunity for the traditionalists like myself to study one Friday on very factual lore-based tradition that our ancestors did, and then on the other week afterward, there's a place for the other people within our community to kind of study and experience that dynamic. We did keep it closed and for our members, because we really, again, believe that, you know, there's got to be a standard within the community. And we want people in these chats, even if it's on the internet, we want to background and screen people, not just for, you know, morality, but for mental stability and things of that nature, because you don't want to put poison into the well.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I'm looking at your call schedule here, and I think it's really good that there's a teen call for the youngsters within our kindreds. I think that that's awesome. You know, that they can have an opportunity to share their experiences with their friends in the kindred. I think that that's awesome. Now, I did have specific questions. So one of them is on your Wednesday show. You have Raven Folk Reborn recovery call. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, our recovery call is pretty important. One of our oath leadership, Desiree, runs that. She's recovering herself, or many years sober. But we have this philosophy in Raven Folk that vices are like the teeth of Fenrir, and it's our daily duty to fight the wolf. I think I coined that phrase a few years back, but we're pretty serious about it. Within our community, there has been, and not just Raven Folk, but within our religious community, you know, there is this disconnect where people forget that chasing purpose over pleasure is the way of our ancestors, and nobility requires to live the actions of honor, not just to speak them. So we try to push back, and that program in general is pretty extreme because they are trying to be there and supportive for people who are battling addiction, but they didn't even pass that. You know, like, there's people there now who have beat their addiction to, say, alcohol, but they're being trying to quit smoking cigarettes now, and it just keeps going, right? Because these vices that are unhealthy for us as a people individually are unhealthy for us collectively as well. There's something to be said with everything in moderation, but if we're all honest with each other, moderation isn't exactly how most of these things are consumed. So we try to take a really hard stance on raising that bar yet again and giving an outlet for people who are struggling in doing so.
You guys are part of the solution. I mean, healing people. I mean, and that's what our gods call us to do, is to, you know, to be healed, to come home, right, and to be sober, right. One of the virtues that Odin teaches us in the Havamal is, you know, about sobriety in a lot of ways, and not to get plastered drunk and things of this nature. And this is definitely helping our focus, especially just in the broader society in general. And the fact that you guys have a dedicated show dedicated to that is amazing, because it shows that you guys are, you know, actively being a part of the solution to society's ills. And I think that that's amazing. And it shows you guys as a beacon that a lot of other groups should strive towards, in all honesty, because that's one of the dark undersides of modernity that a lot of folks don't want to talk about, is the fact that, you know, sometimes of no fault of their own, there are people who get hooked on things, and to be our best selves, not just for our own sake, but also for the sake of our families, for the sake of our communities, you know, getting healthy in that respect, it builds a strong community and full of productive members and things of this nature. And it really does raise the bar, you know, in a very positive way. And so I wanted to personally say that that's awesome what you guys are doing with those recovery calls. And you know, it's making our folk better, which is going to make our families better, which is going to make our communities better, which is going to make revival better. And so That's amazing to hear. One of the other ones that I had is this Yggdrasil program that you have on Fridays. It's a training program every other week. So I'm curious about that. Could you tell us about the Yggdrasil show?
Yeah, absolutely. So that show is for more of the esoteric practice. I had discussed that on one Friday we do the esoteric, and one Friday we do the more traditional. And that is a pretty great show for people along that lines of our spiritual practice. And Miss Heather does a wonderful job at hosting those calls, and it talks about Vril and rune magic and stuff of that nature. So it's something for people interested in those type of things to check out for sure. It's pretty popular, um, but I think there's a pretty good balance now on both sides where people are kind of in and out. I want to stress too that we've come to this revival of our religion, and everyone's so cut and dry here and there. And I realize there is right and wrong, but I want to be clear that even on the esoteric aspect of our shows, we stand those same right and wrongs. I would argue for sure that Harwella may definitely be more esoteric minded, and I might be more traditional, but we meet in the middle pretty greatly. And as far as doing what's right by our people, I trust her completely in her spiritual practices and support her 100%.
Awesome. That's really good. And so one of the things that I'm sure that people are wondering is, are there any written works from Raven Folk United or some of their members that people could get a hold of and learn more about? And I can't say it enough. If you go on the page for those listening or those after the fact, go to ravenfolkunited.org. Their website there. I posted a link on the channel so that you guys can go and take a peek at some of the works that they've done. And I know that you post actively on Telegram as well for people to read. But as far as like written materials, like books, pamphlets, things of this nature, do you have any as of yet that people could get a hold of?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, our actual Ravenfolk laws book is pulled from Amazon because we are revamping it as we've reiterated more traditional law amongst our Raven laws. So we wanted to reflect that and take a more serious approach. That being said, though, we do have our very own Gothic Blank Walls at prairieossetry.com. Him and his kindred do a great job at cultivating a wonderful prison outreach program and a lot of good literature there. So I would encourage you guys to check out his books. He's got a few of them that are not only significant but beneficial to read. And then we do have a children's book from one of our members. Oddly enough, I can't really find a link to it, but if you guys message the email for Raven Folk United, I'm sure you could find it. And it's been already publicized quite widely on most Telegram channels that have to do with our religion. So for right now, that's what we have. And again, we had one previously available, even a couple Holomal interpretations, but we're kind of doing a refocus as we've currently been doing a lot of legal stuff and getting 100% official. We want to present ourselves more professional in that aspect, so we're taking a considerable effort to manifest that.
100%. And the more written materials, the better. In all honesty, because so much was lost over the centuries. But I'm sure as we're reviving, a lot of interpretations are going to be extremely useful moving forward. And there's no better way than opening up the conversation, especially in written form. And I think that that's amazing, and especially the children's books, because as we're starting families, as we're getting married, as we're having kids, and we're raising our kids in this tradition, having materials for them is essential. And I couldn't agree more that this is the way it's got to be. And so that's amazing to hear. And by the way, so if people are interested in getting to know you guys more, interested in applying to become a member of Ravenfolk, how would they get in touch with you guys?
We have Ravenfolk United at Gmail, and then they could also message the website directly. We're pretty good about getting back to people. I want to mention too that book I was mentioning from our membership, I sent it to you in the green room so that if you wanted to share it, it's a pretty great read.
Oh, I've seen this before. Yeah, you guys have been running commercials on Earthfire, if I'm not mistaken. So this is for those on the
that's one of our
for
members.
those.
Yeah, we just want to support them because it's a really great book.
Yeah, for those who are on the call right now and those listening after the fact, this is Little Wolf and Friends, and really great children's book for the youngsters. And no, that's amazing. We should give our support to them for sure. And so just before we end the call, and have some closing statements, I did want to ask one other thing. Are there any um, future plans, things that are in the works that you could give us a little sneak peek as far as Raven Folk and their upcoming plans, if you don't mind?
Yeah, I'm actually pretty excited about this. So we are in the processes of securing land, and it will probably be this year. I mean, it's possible that it might be next year. The goal, though, isn't to have 1,000 pieces of land all across the country. We collectively and completely want to have a chunk of land in the Midwest, which will be our first goal. Then there'll be some on the West Coast and ultimately the East Coast. But that'll be it. We might expand on those properties or make them nicer, but there won't be an invested interest in having 1,000 rundown churches converted to temples of our gods. We want to manifest more of the sacred grove, old style ritual places, and consider those holy spots a place of migration for the big holidays. And meanwhile, of course, we want our faith to spread everywhere. We would like to focus on our dedicated RFU kindreds and achieving land ownership of their own and trying to encourage them to do that for themselves and helping them in any way we can so that we in turn follow our true vision of building kingdoms.
Yeah, that's end goal is, getting something that's handed down, from generation to generation and cherished. And not it, look, I understand why some people find it poetic or ironic or comeuppance in some cases to buy rundown churches and turn them into heathen temples, because for those who may not be aware, a lot of pagan temples were turned into churches originally. But that being said, though, I think that there is a need to have something of our own from the ground up. And and that's going to be the big thing. So as far as like temple design, I know it may be a little presumptuous at this time to ask such a question, but what would be your inspiration? More of a stave, a quote unquote stave church style or longhouse style? What sort of style of temple in the future, of course, would you be considering constructing for Ravenfolk?
This is a pretty cool question. And of course, I'd have to go over with my Goldar, but I think that we've talked about this to such a great extent that they're probably on the same page. I envision a place of worship there would be a main hall with utilities and things of that aspect so that the community can come. Maybe a few rooms there for people to stay. I would like to have either cabins or a couple places where there's actually ability for a livable community there. But the main focus would be the sacred grove and outside ritual circle. That being said, taking a note from Uppsala, I would like to incorporate a smaller hall or temple-style building that has indoor depictions of the gods. But I want the piety level to be super high there, and I think our gods and ancestors deserve that respect. So I envision personally a place where it's separate from the hall, where people won't be drinking and spilling beer as they use foul language amongst the presence of our deities. They will instead maybe wash up before they enter. Maybe there'll be a spigot there or a place for them to clean themselves and maybe dress into something or throw something over them that's suitable for this and walk in and pay tribute and homage to our gods in that aspect. A sacred place where piety is extreme. And that's my dream. My dream is to elevate ourselves to a high standard, but at least the standard that our ancestors had. I feel that there's also time for celebration and beer drinking and enjoying one's company with a kinsman, but there has to be some moderate separation between holy ritual and men enjoying each other's, and women enjoying each other's company in feast mode. So I think there's even depiction in ancestral tradition how there was feasting beforehand, then the procession led to ritual, and in that procession time, it gave people a chance to articulate their thoughts to a place of life and death and the seriousness of what was going on, so that when they attended, it was purposeful and the connection wasn't cheated that way. I believe that to be true.
Perfect. And yeah, no, like there's a hot debate, and it's good that there's both in consideration, which is the fact that we did worship in sacred groves. Sacred groves are a known, attested thing. Groves dedicated to gods and goddesses and the spirits of the land and things of this nature. But also the fact that we did have temples. And I think having both on a sacred site dedicated to the gods themselves, that's the dream. And, having both concurrently at the same time, I'm sure that is going to be a awesome place when the time comes. And do let me know when that approaches, because when it does, that's going to be amazing to see, and it's going to be amazing to support.
Yeah.
And so
We'll be
with
doing fundraising for that pretty soon. We're filing up some legality stuff right now, and then as soon as we're ready, we're gonna try to promote fundraising for that. And the aspect of making sure the legalities come first is there's multiple reasons for that, but also so that people, when they donate, they can take it back on their taxes. So it's a win-win, right? You could donate if you feel like you want to, and in doing so, you also can get those tax credits back at the end of the year, so that you're not just giving blindly.
it's a win-win, and and that's part of the beauty of this, because you guys are a legitimate organization with legitimate tax filings, and that is something that a lot of other alleged groups can't say. And so it's always good just to cross your T's and dot your I's when it comes to that stuff, but it's stuff that needs to happen for our revival to be insured, right? To actually secure land, to build a temple, it requires permits. It requires going through real estate. It requires going through lawyers, and that stuff ain't cheap. And so, but for those of us who are working, we pay taxes, right? And so, why not support a folkish organization and get a tax write-off at the same time? I think that that's amazing, and it's a great opportunity to make sure that pagan revival is inevitable. And so when that time comes, do send me a message, because I want to promote that. That's amazing to hear that it's that close. And I wish you the best, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that develops. But that being said, that's really all the questions I had for you. And I wanted to give a little bit of final thoughts, but I'm going to let you have the last word, of course. So, for those who've been in the show, from the beginning, we went over a lot. We went over the founding of Raven Folk United. We went over what their core beliefs are. We went over even, miraculous signs from the gods at Raven Folk's events, their plans for the future, what they're doing, and what this shows is that pagan revival is not a fad. And in fact, it's long overdue. As we grow, we are like a tree, right? And right now it's wintertime. But in just a couple of weeks, what's going to happen? Those trees with the leaves that have fallen are going to start to sprout again. It's going to come back to life again. And that's really what our ancestral faiths are doing right now, isn't it? That it's been dormant for a time, but that's not forever. The sun returns. It gets warmer. It gets brighter. The day starts to dominate over the night. And in so doing, life returns, doesn't it? The birds come back and they sing. Flowers and trees begin to bloom and grow once again. But the thing is, with a tree, it has deep roots, doesn't it? That these faiths go back so far, it's difficult to fathom. It's difficult to fathom how ancient ancestral faith really is. It's so ancient that it's ingrained in who we are. It flows in your veins, dormant. But there comes a time where it awakens. Slowly but surely, you hear the call. Distant at first, but then it gets louder. And that call is your gods and your ancestors that have always been there, with open arms, waiting for you to hear their call and to embrace them once more. And when that happens, those deep roots, they take up the waters of the melting snow, and they bring forth new life. And how beautiful it is to see the leaves and the flowers come up on these trees. But in the same way, that's true of our ancestral faiths. That's true of pagan revival right now, where you're seeing new revival and in very beautiful and colorful ways, healing our folk and giving them purpose, giving them honor, giving them dignity, giving them, duty, sovereignty. That's what this is about. And Raven Folk United, you've heard it here, is making that a reality. And that is amazing. And that is why Raven Folk United is making pagan revivalism inevitable. And I want to give the last word to you, so without further ado, take it away.
I want to say thank you for the opportunity to be on the show. And I feel like you've honored me more and our organization more than enough. I want to take a second to give all praise to Olden. Her patur Olden, ekalitiknu, golder tu mirgol, thou golder eru, york tu faderbjorni, o han skal tedisieta, hert Olden. Keep our gods high, keep the folk close, and follow us into the future. Join Raven Folk.
Hail to that. Hail to that. All right, so we are in the Q&A portion of Raven Folk Revival. If any of you guys are interested in coming up and asking a question, any question you want, just raise your hand and we'll bring you right on up. We got a lot of people in the listeners. 37. Oh, here we go. We got Chief. Chief, welcome to the show. What would you like to ask?
Hey, I only caught half the show. What's in the future for Raven Folk United?
Okay, I touched on it in the call, but that's a great question. It's just to keep growing, keep following the path of our ancestors, and to keep being true to ourselves and holding ourselves accountable. We have all the aspirations of greatness that anyone might expect, but we're completely fine with doing it slow and steady, and most importantly, keeping our foundations filled with quality. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Chief, for coming up and asking your question here. We got Vesper, who's next in line. Vesper, welcome to the show. What would you like to ask?
Hello, can you hear me well?
Crystal.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank you for sharing Ravenfolk. I hadn't heard of it before. I had concerns about Asatru and Snorri and the Christian filter that these texts have gone through. Anyways, I wanted to ask you if there were any restrictions or any cultural limitations within Ravenfolk as far as race or lineage, because I'm quite olive toned. I'm very Mediterranean, and I feel called to this pantheon.
Okay, so our ethnic standards are in the bylaws. I encourage everyone on here to check that out. We're pan-European. There is migration of Germanic and Celtic tribes throughout Europe, and a lot of the variable deities within the Proto-Indo-European pantheon can be stemmed back forth to Olden. In that, though, we are very pro-ethnic, us. This religion is a tribal ethnic religion. It's for our people. I encourage all peoples to do that for themselves. I would say that it's a case by case in some standards. When you say Mediterranean, like there's probably specifics there. And if you did look like you were not us, there would be inquiries through DNA for sure. And it's not inherently out of disrespect, but trying to preserve what we have. I want to really clarify here that we're at a point where our ancestral faith was all but wiped out. And as we realign and reiterate the morality of our grandmothers' grandmothers and our grandfathers' grandfathers and their stories for us, we want to preserve it in the line of our descendants that they might resemble those people who sought for their descendants to exist. And it's simply out of love for who we are and having the right to exist as who we are and who we were born to be. So we're pretty strict on it. But if you are indeed just Mediterranean and European, you have a place with us for certain. I would encourage you to check out the details of our ethnic standards, though, because they're very important.
I'll look into that. Yes, thank you for the answer. I've been very interested in using tools on the internet to analyze raw DNA, my raw genome, to get clarity on the matter, because it does keep me up at night as of late. But yeah, I
You're more,
appreciate it.
you're more than welcome to send
Well,
an email after too if you want to have a further conversation about any of these topics.
I appreciate it.
thank you, Vesper, for coming up and asking your question. I really appreciate that. Next, we got AC, who's been waiting very patiently. AC, welcome to the show. What would you like to say?
Hello?
How's it going?
Sorry,
Here you-
it blanked out there for a minute. I only have a couple questions. This is Austin Collins. One, do you all actually have an apprenticeship program? And two, as far as the AFA goes, are you all, I guess it sounds like you all are actually trained in some of the older Odinism that existed even before the AFA existed, such as the Odinic Rite.
I'm not sure what your question is. Do some of us we're in good standing with the Odinic Rite?
Well, we'll
Right.
Yeah.
we'll take the questions one at a time. So, his first question was, um, do reiterate it if you could, please. It's my
I
apologies.
was wondering
should
if
have,
the Ravens folk, as far as their training, was more than just AFA, because it sounds like Ravens folk is
That's a
much
great
more
question.
traditional.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we're way opposite of them, and I think the best polar example I can give to that is, and this is no slight to my Italian kinsmen out there, but I'm very pro Germanic and Celtic ancestry, which is my DNA, and I'm very not pro Rome. And I think that the Osage Folk Assembly in its purest form, if you take away all of the negative aspects, they still model themselves after the papacy and Catholicism in general with an Osage flair. And we very specifically model everything from our nation structure to our religious rituals after our ancestral traditions. It's pretty common sense for us, honestly. But I appreciate the opportunity to have that discussion.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it.
was that all the questions you had, AC? Or
No, the second question was as far as like apprenticeship, because the Odinic Rite, that's where I did my first apprenticeship around like 2005. And I have to admit, I wish that they would bring back the apprenticeship they once had, because there was a layout. They would send out materials so that all of us had to prove our worth by being able to reiterate what we were learning. But I've noticed, with nothing against the FA or other organizations, there's not as much as there should be because of some of these moots and some of the Hoffs. Yes, there's some lore that's talked about, but no one is tested on things like our boys and girls once were, obviously our ancestors, grew up in this. And I feel that a lot of organizations not offering apprenticeship, there's not enough teaching. Yeah, one or two books that's great and all, but it should be something. Obviously you all do push this, that we should be living it constantly. Are you all setting up an apprenticeship where people will have to learn our culture to actually say, hey, I am a part of our culture?
Yeah, so that's also a wonderful question. And it almost had me, I think the confusion I had was when we were talking about apprenticeship. I was thinking of the context of like our Gothar, right? Like, of course, we have a aspect to learn the lore more in depthly for our Gothar, but you are discussing the angle of regular membership, and I think it's phenomenal that you brought it up. So we talked about the manor bond, and within our community, that is what it specifies. It's making, not forcefully, but yeah, forcefully encouraging our men, if they want a place in our community, that they have to not only be to a physical standard, but there's also a lot of lore-based and traditional-based education. And I will say, even though I'm not in the women's chat, that I believe our women do an equally fantastic job at trying to make sure that everyone is up to date with our traditions and being aware of it, so that you don't have 40 people sitting around on their phones trying to look up runes, during a blow.
Right.
We have a long road ahead, and I think that this discussion, or this type of discussion, is probably paramount. Because if we're really going to be able to defend our faith spiritually and physically and then socially amongst ourselves and outside the wall, you have to be familiar with the faith enough to really know the reality of it and be able to argue those points. Our lore studies have evolved exponentially, especially within the last 2 months, to the point where the skaldic poetry and lore study that all members get to take part in is exquisite. It's almost a program in itself, really, and I enjoy it to a great extent. But so there's multiple layers would be my simple answer. We have
Yes, sir. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
thank you, AC, for coming up and asking your questions. Greatly appreciate that. Folkish Awakening, I did see your hand up next, but you put it down. So if you want to speak again, we'll rush you right to the front of the line. But next we have Stephen with the hand up. Stephen, welcome to the show. What would you like to ask?
Hi, I was just hoping that you guys could touch on the Manor Bund and tell me a little bit more about what would be expected after I did join the Manor Bund of me. Like, what kind of things would you guys expect out of me if I was a member?
Okay, that's a great question. So all of that is listed on the RavenFolkUnited.org. And I'm not trying to force off the question. I'm still going to answer it. But in case I miss any points, I want you to be able to look it up further. That being said, the initial aspect is physical requirement. The auxiliary is a lot more lenient, and it's mostly about people trying to see where they're at, and then we push them forward. So a simple answer would be probably that you would be encouraged to push yourself into growth, both physically and mentally, and ultimately spiritually. The laws and structure of all of that within the Manor Bund is listed right on our main website, I believe. And if it's not, please send me an email. Does that answer your question, sir?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Stephen, for coming up and asking your question. We appreciate you. Focus Awakening got your hand back up, so we're going to rush you to the front of the line. I'm a man of my word, of course. Focus Awakening, welcome to the channel. Welcome to the show. What would you like to ask?
First, I want to say awesome show. Second, my question is mainly heathen community first connected through AFA because of its long history of pushing a focused approach to the gods and ancestors. Under Matt Flavel's leadership, it's become mostly long, self-indulgent podcasts and nonstop begging for money with little real action or leading by example. So why do you think people stay tied to AFA when groups like RFU are actually growing, building, and doing the work instead of just limping along?
Why do I think they stay? It's for me, that's a pretty obvious question. I think our people are good by nature in general. I believe that we realize that we need community, and some of the aspects of having a community right at your disposal is really tantalizing. And the danger there, though, is it should never be where you look past the moral obligations we have to each other. Again, not to reiterate on them, but since it's brought up, I lived relatively close to a Hoff. It was a big part of my religious experience, so it's not something that was taken lightly, and I understand that burden quite well. So I don't really blame members. I do think, though, there's a point where if you understand these transgressions took place and that there's no atonement to try to rightful these wrongs, then I don't understand. So at that point, I think that they should join us. I think if leadership changed, then maybe they can stay them and fix them. I don't need to have everyone be us, but in the allude to how it is currently, I think we're most definitely the superior option.
Hopefully that answered your question. Focus Awakening.
Yep, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming up. And by the way, love the channel. Everybody go subscribe to Focus Awakening. Excellent channel. And boilerplate, I should have said this before. Go subscribe to Raven Folk United's Telegram channel. You're going to find a lot of great content there. So thank you for coming up and asking your question. I did see Jacob Griffith with the hand up. So I did want to give you an opportunity to speak here. So I'm going to hand you the mic. Jacob, what would you like to ask?
Howdy. Hey, I was wondering, because I think it's important to be a contributing member and not just a passive member. And so I was thinking, what are some skills a member, specifically a male member, can develop to contribute to the community?
Oh, that's a great question. I think that we always need help with the internet. A lot of our membership, myself including, tech isn't our best, but we have some pretty good tech guys. Crafting, we like to auction things that are folkishly made by our community versus, a lot of people will buy things, and which is fine. It is what it is, but we like to promote within. So building, crafting, making, anyone in the trades, honestly, if you work in the trades, you're potentially setting yourself up to benefit our communities and your people. So continue doing that and perfecting that art, because we're going to need builders. And most importantly, just follow through. Cultivating the will to do what you say, I think, is one of the fundamental aspects of modern society that will change everything. You can have 1,000 discussions and 1,000 desires, but if you don't take those steps in the real world to manifest that real change, then nothing will happen. I hope that answered your question.
Yep. Thank you, man. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob, for coming up and asking your question. Appreciate you being here. Next, we have Time Traveler. Next on the list, Time Traveler. Welcome to the show. What would you like to ask?
So you guys talked about temples. I actually built well, not physically, but a digital model for a temple, and it had an outside bathhouse where, well, that was for males and females, where they could clean themselves before entering the temple grounds. That was one idea, and then there was an altar. Well, there might be some people from another Telegram chat that I shared pictures with. Let's see the other thing. Oh, okay. So two things I've never done. Like, I've heard people talk about miracles before, and I've never, like, I don't know, went and tried to find evidence of it, outside of whatever. I've always just went ahead and taken their word for it. I want you all to know that what our brother said about the aurora in Oklahoma is 100% true. It, obviously other people saw it. That's pretty amazing. You talked about having a manor bund for your religious group. I would just quietly suggest that you include in the manor bund training flying quadcopters and model airplanes. And I'll just leave it at that. Hey, thank you all very much.
Well, thank you for your statement. Appreciate you being here, of course. And next on the list, we got Shade McCready next in line. So, Shade, welcome to the show. What would you like to ask?
Hi, thank you. A couple questions back, we were talking about the AFA. If there's a change in leadership, that there could be some potential for just there's a realignment of maybe their direction, but also just to the greater vision of earlier mentioning Herman of the Cherusci and the Germanic tribes, like at the level of that there's many small tribes or kindreds organizations across the nation. I was just curious for your perspective to the potential for unifying efforts, maybe in a longer time frame for the sake of pagan revival and for the flourishing of our culture, our ancestral faith. What do you think that is important to keep in mind, maybe for those who do have kind of an identity that's already established, but are interested in what we're doing, and how there might be collaboration between our organization or between various groups within the pagan sphere.
Yeah, I wrote an article recently, I think it's actually on the website, and I discussed the aspect of unity. Now, amongst our folk, especially in the religious community, and ultimately timeless is the example, any one of us could probably achieve victory. It's a great allegory of crabs in a bucket. Singularly, one of them could just crawl out, but there's this nature where they pull each other down. And I envisioned that our folk could get a lot farther if we held each other up and tried to work together amongst reason, though. I think that standards have to be a thing and accountability have to be a thing, so that none of us are perfect, but that when a decision is made or atonement is needed, that it's achieved. And I envision us working with a lot of groups we have, and we currently do. If the leadership changed and they were doing something productive to right the wrongs of their past, I mean, there's a lot to be salvaged there, I'd imagine. I have no desire to be them, but I will work with anyone who holds the same values as that we do. It doesn't mean I'm going to fly their flags at our events, but I will donate to their auctions and I will help support them. Not currently, let's be very clear, if we're talking about the predecessors, obviously, but I think we should support each other. So often we throw stones at each other for trying to make leaps and bounds, and then we sit around and wonder why victories aren't achieved. Really, I think we're more than capable of doing it, but learning how to work together is going to be a pivotal point in our people's history, especially in this sick age that we currently live in. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shade, for coming up and asking your question. We did have Cash, so I don't know if people could tag him, but if you can, I'd like to have him back on to ask a question, because I know he had his hand up there.
He's in the
So
chat right now.
yeah, if you could tag him, we'll bring him right back up. And oh, there he is. Okay, welcome, Cash. Good to have you on the show. What would you like to ask?
There we go. There we go. Yeah, it's kind of along the same lines of what Shade said. For folks, first, I want to say, hey, thank you for all you do, Michael. Man, been super impressive watching you and yours grow and develop what you have, man. It's beautiful, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
And I guess a question that I have is, I got kind of a small group of folks out here in the Pacific Northwest that practice. And one of the things that I think stands in the way of a lot of organizations and groups that are already established is just that path forward and the risk of losing some of that local identity and having a hard time seeing the broader, greater connection to the greater folk and seeing like how do you see like a way forward for organizations like my own and others that can help to preserve local identity, see past that, and recognize the advantages of being a part of the greater identity?
I love this question so much. And I love all that you guys do up there. I know you're familiar. Anytime you guys have ever had any kind of need or fundraiser, we've supported you. And you guys have always showed an immense amount of reciprocity. So that relationship, I feel, is already intact. As far as local community, people in our faith in general are jaded because we've had these personalities come in and promise the world to our people and then betray them. Whether it's intentional or not, it's nonetheless. And in that, there's a distaste in a lot of people's mouths, especially those of us who have been doing this this sort of thing in general since children. You see it time and time again, and it makes a man jaded. And not that that's your case, but in general, right? So what I would say is that having an organization that is an overall banner, accountability needs to be there. Transition of power, right? Like I have in place where there will be another Hildinger to come. I don't intend to hold on with a dying grip to any kind of leadership position. I want to create something beautiful and then in good standing, handing that off to the next generation instead of it being a scandal like so often in our religious community. That being said, amongst our leadership structure and structural design in general, we're really big on promoting communities and helping them, if they're not already there, govern themselves. But if we look at our ancestral traditions, especially Herman and the Battle of Teutoburg, which was the foundational point in which I laid a lot of the structure, you see it in every pagan movie that currently exists, in every book. There's always this conflict of personalities because we're both people and we speak our minds. And it's hard for us to align collectively until the enemy is at our heels. And then we have no way to defeat them, or we defeat them once, and then we clash against each other again. And I argue that if there's ever been a time that Rome has been on our heels as a people, it's now. And I call out to all of my people, it's not about coming under one banner, it's about unification. Maintain your kingdoms. I will do everything in my power to help you guys thrive, give you all the resources that we have available, and all I ask is reciprocity. And it's not under me, it's not under a banner, it's under this sacred flag that Odin himself, the sacred raven banner, 1,000 years of conquest. I ask that you hold that and our people up. So that's all I require, is that there's reciprocity between us and our folk. And Raven Folk is less of an organization as it is a vehicle to manifest this real unity in the real world. And I believe in it. I know a lot of you guys who don't know me, it's just like anyone else talking, but I ask, look into it yourself and see if my words don't mean true. I've had battles under my belt where a lot of men, maybe even in this chat, I probably stood side by side with you facing overwhelming odds, if not certain death. And I've never faltered in all my years, and I've never asked anything from folk except to believe in ourselves and to join each other, to unite under a banner and a cause sacred and more holy than ourselves, so that our descendants have the foundation to stand on that they deserve. And that's a general question. Like, you guys are great. I'm not asking you to change anything. It's just my heart. I'm sure.
Allude to that, Bruder, and know that for me and mine up here in the Pacific Northwest, man, we have a lot of love and respect for you and all the things that you guys are doing, and hope to have many projects with y'all in the future. Hail.
Hail to the future and hail to you guys.
Well, thank you, Cash, for coming up and asking your question. Greatly appreciate that. Is there anybody else who would like to ask a question? Now's your time. Oh, we got one. We got Dave Martell. Dave Martell, welcome to the show. What would you like to ask?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Crystal.
Beautiful. Hey, I just came into knowledge of Raven Folk a few months ago, and I'm interested to learn more about it. I'm sorry I missed the show. Busy day today. But, first of all, blessings and victory and success to you guys. I know some of the folks you guys got involved, and you got some great folks over there. So I hope you guys have all the success. But I just wanted to ask, I'm curious, what regions are the Raven Folk interested in being involved with?
I mean, we're national. On our website, we have a pretty specific. It's broken to segmented parts for our Jarls to have easier ability and leadership in orchestrating resources in that aspect. But we're nationally. So if there's anywhere at all that you guys are hosting anything and want to work with us, we probably have members in your area.
So I just have a quick question to that regard, because like many of you guys here, I've been in the community for years and years and years, and we've seen lots of organizations come and go. Some good, some not so good. I'm sure you guys are familiar with some of the not so goods, and I have seen that many of the organizations that started out trying to go national have sort of run into this issue of having folks sign up in remote areas, and then they don't really get to participate. How are you guys going to address this sort of obstacle that national organizations in our faith have, where they sort of like lack coverage and end up kind of getting spread too thin? Do you guys have a plan on how to address that, or is that something you're just gonna? I'd like to hear your thoughts on it.
Well, I think one of the issues at hand when we're talking about lack of coverage or participation is that a lot of groups that have occupied this role in previous years, they use the outlying of churches. So they want to have their organization and they want to spread it out very far, and they don't think about local community. Well, putting kindreds at a place of importance kind of alleviates that issue. There has been a few separate issues where there's a person here, a person there, and they're kind of all alone. And I think to the contrary of it being an individual alone, I think it's a wonderful thing that they have a place in a community to come to. So if we didn't exist, they might actually be alone. But nonetheless, we encourage people to real world events, and usually the interactions in real life is what makes a genuine momentum of people gathering for real, and it alleviates a lot of the dead zones that you talk about.
Excellent. That was pretty much my only question. I just, I'm not throwing wrenches in gears. I'm just curious because I've seen it. You know what I mean? And I hope you guys overcome that obstacle and do awesome.
Well, I think there's also a great opportunity for, inter-community networking, right? In a way that, like, maybe you don't have coverage in a certain area, but you know a good group that is, and stuff like that, and vice versa. I think it's a great opportunity for cross-tribal networking and build that unity, right? And so perhaps that's something that could be developed more in the future as Frith grows between different groups and organizations. But I think that that may be the future in a lot of cases.
Actually, I do have one more question, if it's okay.
Go ahead. Yeah, let's do it.
How strict are you guys as far as orthodoxy goes? For example, I have a lot of times very large organizations are like a big theological tent, and they end up with a lot of. I've gone to events with other orgs, and they say one thing, and I get there, and they're worshiping Thyrsis, and saying that doing Loki worship, and some weird occultic stuff. Are you guys more strict on orthodoxy and theology and stuff like that, or are you guys more of a big tent and just let the local guys teach, or what's your position on that?
Yeah, so I kind of touched on it a little bit during the call. So I'm very traditional, and and we do have people who are more esoteric. So we are kind of a little bit inclusive in that nature, but I do want to make the separation. Any of those issues that you just talked about would never happen at any of our things, because even our most esoteric or whatever verbiage you would like to use to describe that narrative of our faith that we have, they're pretty strict still, and I trust them immensely with their discernment on keeping it God's order, and those basic things that you might see at an event like that would never transpire at a Raven Folk event. I also want to clarify, we are, or I am, very traditional, but it doesn't negate the fact that it's not about being big tent or little tent. It's about causing further divides within our community at such a small point in our history, where division really can be something that destroys everything. Now, it doesn't mean you can't push lines or you shouldn't push lines. I agree that you absolutely should hold standards. But there's a lot to be said with teaching, with doing, and living certain ways, and then letting our folk, which I trust them immensely, in choosing for themselves. When you start drawing these lines out where you can't do this, I mean, with reason, you can't do this or that because this is the way I do it. I feel like showing them that this is traditional religion. This is what it looks like. And then listening to what they have to say and actually hearing them collectively makes us move forward in an evolutionary process that ultimately probably and hopefully most likely will be more traditional. But drawing these hard lines in the sand and trying to push our folk away is only going to destroy us entirely. And I believe that personally. It doesn't mean we should.
Well, there's a lot of people who come in with a lot of bad information. I mean, anybody who's been in the sphere for a long time has known about the Vikings TV show influx, okay, and stuff like that. And yeah, look, of course, there's definite hard lines, but there's also things that are, could go either way, and where those hard lines are drawn, and I'm sure that I speak for Mike here. But as far as everyone who's part of Folkish Heathen Revival, we're not hailing Loki. Okay. like we're not giving offerings to Fenrir and stuff like that. Like it's but at the same time, as far as like, somebody who has a more uh poetic view of the legends versus a more literal and stuff like that, I think those things can be worked out through discussion. Is that a accurate way of depicting it, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you misrepresented anything. I feel like it's easy to harp on the inconsistencies, right? When these lines are like, no one's doing those things. And if you've been, and no disrespect to you, sir, I don't really know you well. I know of you though, and I haven't heard anything too negative. And I don't mean to discredit your question, but I think it's important to say that, like, if you're at an event and you see people doing Hell and Loki and stuff like that, then you're at the wrong event, sir, and you should probably leave that event immediately. You'll never find that here. We would stop a ritual in its tracks, and it would be handled. And while we're mentioning that, there's been occasions where people have come, whether they had mixed DNA, and definitely were obviously not us, or other circumstances during ritual, and it's immediately and promptly dealt with. There's no waiting till the next event or handling it tomorrow. We address it then, there, and in front of the community. And I think that's all we really can do as we evolve forward. Take issue by event.
Yeah, I didn't mean to come off rude or press too hard or anything, but I'm curious because I've seen organizations say, "Hey, we're going to be, more inviting," and then before you know it, they got these like weird Luciferian, left-hand types that slither into leadership, and it always ends up being weird cult, gross stuff. You know what I mean? These people they always seem to find their way into leadership, and then you get the sex scandals and creepy stuff like that. And I'm less concerned than, I have this interpretation of this stanza in the Voluspa versus this, and more concerned with people that are really far out, that are, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, for sure. Our religious clergy in general, they've all been around for a very long time, and I trust them immensely. They were they may be a little more esoteric, some of them, and some of them more traditional, but there's a very hard line on right and wrong and gods of order that I would trust them blindly. In fact, so much so that if it came across them and I was nowhere near, that they would speak up and boldly. So I have no doubts in that. But it's a good question.
What I'll do, Dave, I'm gonna host the interview. We kind of go over the standards and the tenets of Raven Folk in the interview portion, and it'll be free on MP3. So if you want to listen to that with the timestamps, yeah, you'll get you'll get the rundown on that. So, but yeah, these folks are good folks.
Good, awesome. Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to press or anything, but those are real questions. I figured I'd.
I encourage
No, it's reasonable, especially because I mean we've seen quote unquote big organizations. I don't know how big they actually are, like the Troth, go down this ridiculous fake pagan path. And yeah, the Raven Folk is not one of them because that no, not even close. But yeah,
say something before we get too close to the end here. You don't have to apologize for asking questions, and neither does anyone on here. I feel like I really like this show because of the aspect of asking the hard questions, and we as a people have to get past the point where we adapt these unconscious modern narratives where we're apologetic for speaking boldly or our mind, or we might hurt someone's feelings. I say speak the truth and be bold, sir, and you did a good job at asking what you felt to be necessary. There's no offense taken there. As long as people conduct themselves with manners and respect, these kind of conversations need to happen so that there's not confusion. And so giving us a platform to do this on a mass scale, I commend the host of the show and everyone who asked the difficult questions, honestly.
No, I appreciate that. And yeah, no, I second that, because the thing is that questions like what Dave was asking, is as far as like, what are the lines drawn are very valid. And especially these days, because there's a bunch of organizations, and some of them have, very ancestral standards. Like you guys, like everybody here. Norena Society, another great example. And then there's some that are loosey goosey with the standards, and those are bad news. And it certainly is a valid question, but rest assured, when I publish the interview, give it a listen when you get the chance, Dave, and you'll be pleasantly surprised. And they have all of their standards and everything on their website, so you could go check that out when you get a chance.
Beautiful, thank you. Blessings to you guys and hails, and I hope you guys have all the success. Hopefully, you'll make your way out to the East Coast, and I'll get to hang out with some of you guys eventually.
Sounds good.
Well, thank you for coming on, Dave, and asking your questions. Greatly appreciate that. Is there anybody else who would like to ask a question? Going once. Going twice. We got one. Kyle Davis, welcome back to the show. What would you like to ask?
First off, hi, Michael. I'm Kyle Davis from the Norena Society. Big fan. How are you doing today, bro?
Doing great, man. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, no. I was just curious. I had to kind of tune in and out while you were doing this, so I may have missed it. But I was curious if you can give some leadership advice to communities that are trying to get going. Like, how do you start to gather? What are the best methods that you found that work to bring people together? What didn't work? Stuff like that.
I will say that there's a difference in how I gathered people in my younger years and how we do so in the religious community. I think that as stern as we want to be, there's a level of empathetic nature that has to transpire when you're dealing with whole families. But ultimately, by example, I think that if you're going to cultivate any kind of direction for anyone, it needs to first start with your own life and how you live and how you conduct yourself always. So if, for example, you're trying to manifest an environment where alcohol is not the predominant force of gathering, you can't be a drunk. If you want to talk about moral fortitude in the community, you cannot cheat on your wife. You must hold yourself to a standard almost higher than that of your community. And yes, we're mortal men that will make mistakes, but the attempt has to be there and it has to be genuine to apply these things to your own life. And I think with that, that is the most purest form of leadership, is by example. And ultimately, I've been in a leadership position in one form or another since a really young man. And the only thing I know to be true is that you have to be hardest on yourself. Because if you're hard on everyone else and not you, then you're doomed to make errors and mistakes. So that's not really the only advice I have on leadership. It's hard and it'll break your heart, but it's for the benefit of the folk. And if you do it righteously, it's also very rewarding.
Sure. I think I was more or less like trying to say like, because I completely agree with you there. Having standards and conducting yourself.
Community.
Yeah, like how? Yeah, like so, like you have like groups around America that are wanting to do what you do, but how do you start? Where do you? How do you like come up with an idea to be able to host an event, or how do you bring people together? That kind of stuff.
Yeah. So religious gatherings, and so say first off, like we're ground level. You're this person. You're not even aware of the internet, and you want to start gatherings. You can go to coffee shops and put flyers up for the interaction with individuals. But there is the internet, and you can find a lot of people in your local communities. But I think that actually trying to organize and orchestrate real world in real life gatherings is the key, especially if you want to be like us, because that's the fundamental point that I think separates us from a lot of communities, is that we are in real life. We have a substantial internet gathering, but it's the in real life world that we put at the forefront and value the most, because it's what matters. It's hard, but I think that there's a plethora of avenues. The Norrena study, like you said, they have a lot of good research on what our religion is. I encourage everyone to check that out. Absolutely. Our Brother Glenn Qualls has some books that are fantastic as well. But educating yourself and getting out there and doing it. Like a lot of people are just sit around and they want things, but they don't take the action. So you have to gather. You have to get out there in the real world, put these things together, and you're going to slip up, make mistakes, meet some weirdos. But the alternative is doing nothing. So if you want an organization of your own, I'd start local, the kindred level, and discern what you want out of this faith and how you practice it first and foremost, and then align yourself with people in the same spectrum of practice and move forward from there. I hope that answers your question thoroughly.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. And as I said before, I'm very glad to see you guys pushing forward and making the right changes to be the traditional group you're trying to be. So hail to you guys, and I look forward to seeing your continued growth, my friend.
You too, brother. Thank you.
I'll send you an advanced copy of the interview so you can listen to that on your free time.
Perfect.
Before I post on the channel. So, but we got Cash coming back up with another question. So, Cash, welcome back.
Hey, thanks. And if you're over time, man, I can touch base on this a little bit later. Just curious, and if it's already published on your website, or if you ever covered it, just let me know and I'll look at that. What I'm curious about is your process for removing undesirables or people that are being accused of things. Do you have an established process? Do you have a thing process? What does that look like for kind of in response to what Big Dave was talking about? If something like that started to come up, is there a process established to stop it in its tracks?
Yeah, we talked about it on the thing, but I'll go over it briefly again. We have an immediate action process where both parties are removed from groups, and we have Gothar usually, unless it involves Gothar, I would imagine, hold as mediation. We do have an all-thing process, which is suitable too, so that even I can be addressed, right? So that no one is beyond reproach, which is a constant narrative I reiterate. But yeah, we try to find resolutions, and that would be if we could do that instead of throw people away. But sometimes transgressions are so severe that you have to get rid of them. Nonetheless, while we're sorting it out, everyone's pulled. Sometimes people get their feelings hurt for that. It's really non-consequential. The safety of our community is the priority, and so that's how we do it, immediately and aggressively. And then we discern who's right, who's wrong, and what kind of consequences or atonements are going to be necessary, and then we move forward from there. I do want to reiterate that I think we're more than empathetic and lenient in some aspects, but things that are severe, we have severe consequences. It's that simple.
And in the case, like they kind of Dave was alluding to, like if like a creepy little guy starts getting a little bit more creepy, but there's nothing to put your finger on just yet, or like that's hard to deal with no matter who you are or where you are. But what in situations like that where somebody's just a little bit off?
Well, I mean, that's a good question, right? So we want to have a transparency here. So I'm going to be honest with you. You know, our community safety comes first. So if there's an overlying majority of our community that doesn't feel safe with someone, they're obviously going to be removed. And like I say, I haven't had to personally instill any kind of vetoes or things of that nature. But if there's someone I feel is not safe for our community, I'm going to pull them. And I'll probably go over it with our Goldar. Usually we're all on the same page with that. Not everything is black and white, man. There could be a dude who doesn't have any charges on him at all, and he's just completely inappropriate at our events, which, for the record and for everyone listening, I wouldn't suggest trying to do at a Raven Folk event. It wouldn't be beneficial to either party. I'm just being honest there. Like, this isn't the one where you're going to get walked off and patted on the back for if you harm our women or children. Consequences are immediate and severe. I think that's not a threat. That's just a man with a community to protect, being honest. So, yeah.
Thank you for that. That's exactly what we do out here too. So I appreciate that and support that.
Very good. Very good. Is there anybody else who would want to ask a question? Now's your time. Going once. Going twice. Hold on a second here. All right. So I think that'll be all. Thank you, everybody who came up and asked your questions. Greatly appreciate you coming up. And is there any final thoughts, any final words, places people can go, give the folks your information? We would love to hear it.
I just want to thank everybody that tuned in. I mean, ultimately, we always glorify the leadership or figureheads of communities because they're in the spotlight, and rightly so to a great extent. But it's the membership and the individuals that participate that are really, what matter and what changes the course of history. So to each and every single one of you who may not have seen any praise today, praise to you for taking the time out of your busy lives to participate in Folkish Awakening and the revival of our ancestral traditions and spirituality. God's be with you.
God's be with you. And thank you for coming on, Michael. We greatly appreciate you.
Yeah, real quick, I know that we had talked before about having sometime in the future my Goldar on here, and I look forward to that opportunity. I know my Goldar are really excited to kind of also at some point
Thank you.
be interviewed. So when you're ready for that, let us know, and they're waiting eagerly.
Well, really, that's going to be up to you. So for those in the audience, you get a little sneak peek in a future episode. What I would love to have is a Gothar roundtable.
Yes.
And really, the idea for the show, and we're still working out the details. So if it doesn't come to be the way I say it now, then this is just part of the brainstorming process. But to kind of advocate for the show, what I like to have is the Gothar to come into a group chat, right? Kind of like this, where everybody's on a call. I'm going to throw out a theological question, and I want the discussion between the different Gothar about the theological question. And I want people to see how those types of conversations with people who love this faith, active in this faith, or know about this faith, participate in the faith, and are leaders discuss these types of questions, because I think that would be useful for a lot of us who aren't in leadership to see how that unfolds. And I think that would be an amazing show. So as far as a date, give me a month and we'll make it happen. You know how I schedule out these shows.
Yeah, I'd have to talk to my Goldar, but I know they're eager, so I'll get with you in the green room, and I don't want to say something and not be true. So when I talk to them and get a good, viable date, I'll get it right to you directly.
Awesome. And by the way, if you can, just invite them into that chat room, and we can discuss it further from there. So really good, and thank you for spending the time here on the Pagan Revivalist show. We like everything that you've accomplished thus far. It is really awesome, not just for heathenry by itself, but for all of Pagan Revival, that you're really putting in the work, that all of the effort that you've done to build Raven Folk and revive ancestral faiths, it doesn't go unnoticed. And, you know, and this comes from me, and I'm sure it comes from everybody in the audience, that we really appreciate everything that you've done. And thank you for coming on the show.
I appreciate the compliment, and I want to again credit my leadership because I couldn't have done it alone. And all praise to Odin; he gets full glory. Thank you, sir.
Hail to the gods.
Hail.
Gods be with y'all. Have a great day.